You've probably heard about Rabbi Wentworth Matthew, the founder of the Commandment Keepers, a Black Israelite group that gained attention during a lesser-known figure in the story of Black Israelism is Rabbi Matthew's mentor and inspiration, Rabbi Arnold Josiah Ford. Rabbi Ford would be the first known person to take the Black Israelite theology to the land of its origins. Arnold Josiah Ford was born in Bridgetown, Barbados in 1877. He would later claim that his father was Yoruba, a tribe in southwest Nigeria, and his mother descended from the Mende tribe of Sierra Leone. As far as the residents of Bridgetown were concerned, the Fords were regular people. Arnold's father worked as a part-time policeman and part-time preacher in the local Methodist church. Arnold's parents felt that their son's best path to financial stability would be a career in music. They paid for private lessons, which trained Arnold to play many instruments like the harp and violin. These efforts paid off when Arnold successfully joined the musical corps of the British Royal Navy in 1899. In 1910, Ford arrived in Harlem, New York, and quickly became a part of the burgeoning music scene. He became a member of the Clef Club Orchestra and the director of the New Amsterdam Musical Association. Religiously, Ford was drawn to secret societies like the Scottish Rite Masons, which claimed to possess ancient knowledge and required members to learn secret passwords and handshakes. Eventually, Ford met a woman named Olive Nurse, whom he married. The couple had 2 children. Ford also crossed paths with another interesting historical figure, the Reverend St. Bishop the Vine. The Reverend was born John Hickerson in Alexandria, Virginia, and had worked as a cook, sailor, and lay minister. He came to Baltimore in 1905 and began spreading religious views influenced by Pentecostal and holiness churches. It was there that the bishop met Father Jehovah, formerly known as Samuel Morris, and the Messenger, formerly known as George Baker. The 2 men lived in a boarding house where they led religious services during the week. Father Jehovah believed that he was God in the fathership degree, while the messenger took the role of God in the sonship degree. The bishop accepted the teachings of the 2 men and was invited to join as a new religious leader. After Bishop the Vine joined the group, attendance at services rapidly increased. The bishop jumped, shouted, and claimed to speak many foreign languages, which excited audiences. However, the trio's thriving ministry came to a standstill when the bishop and the Father Jehovah began having arguments over their leadership roles. The bishop disagreed about the exclusivity of the fathership degree and argued that God was equally present in all people. In 1912, the messenger concluded that both men were wrong. He came to believe that he was the true human expression of God. George Baker left the group and headed south to create his own movement. He took a new name, Reverend Major Jealous Divine. His followers called him simply Father Divine. By 1914, Bishop Divine was in Harlem leading his own church called the Church of the Living God, the Pillar and Ground of the Truth. He combined many of the beliefs he had taught in Baltimore with the additional claim that he was an Ethiopian. The bishop would later claim that he was the one who taught Arnold Ford Hebrew. The fact that Ford's eventual protege, Rabbi Wentworth Matthew, would create a synagogue named Commandment Keepers, Church of the Living God, the Pillar and Ground of Truth, a name which is strikingly similar to that of Bishop the Vine's church, is seen as evidence that the bishop heavily influenced Ford. Of course, it's also possible that Rabbi Matthew heard about the bishop's church on his own by exploring and networking within Harlem. Ford joined the New York chapter of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or UNIA, and became the organization's musical director. He and other leaders were responsible for developing the principles and direction of the organization. Inspired by the Jewish Legion, the UNIA formed the African Legion. The Jewish Legion was a military unit which fought on behalf of the British against the Ottoman Empire during World War I in exchange for a promise that the British would establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine after the war. Ford helped to write the regulations for the African Legion and the Black Cross Nurses, an auxiliary group for female UNIA members. He also wrote a song entitled Ethiopia, which promoted the idea that Ethiopia was the ancient homeland of Black Black Americans. The focus on Ethiopia stems from a biblical passage which reads, "Envoys will come from Egypt. Ethiopia shall soon stretch out her hand to God." Psalm 68:31. Ethiopia was one of the earliest African nations to accept Christianity, and it was believed to have nurtured early forms of Judaism. Legend held that King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba conceived a child who became the first king of Ethiopia. Adding to its reputation, in 1896 the nation successfully avoided European colonization when it won the Battle of Adwa against Italy. The belief in Ethiopian ancestry inspired racial pride during a period when racial discrimination against Black Americans was intensifying. Ethiopian heritage rebutted the accusations of inferiority aimed at Black people. For the 1920 International Convention of Negro Peoples of the World, which was held at Madison Square Garden, Arnold Ford served as one of the 35,000 delegates who would develop and vote on official organizational matters. The attendees voted to adopt the red, green, and black flag as the official UNIA flag, and to make Ethiopia the universal anthem. Ford advocated for the term Ethiopian to be used instead of Negro to refer to people of African descent. Additionally, he published a book of UNIA songs called the Universal Ethiopian Hymnal. Ford was an early advocate for making Judaism the future official religion of Black people. The ascent of the UNIA was interrupted when its founder, Marcus Garvey, was arrested in 1923. Though Ford refused to testify against Marcus Garvey on behalf of the prosecution, he still sued Garvey and the UNIA for failing to pay royalties for his musical work. In 1926, Ford won his lawsuits. After that, he no longer held a position as an organizational officer, but still remained cordial with the members. In fact, he was invited to speak at the 1926 UNIA convention. Ford had independently immersed himself in Judaism. He started a congregation called Beth B'nai Israel and helped a man named Mordecai Herman start the Moorish Zionist temple. He helped Rabbi Wentworth Matthew, founder of the Commandment Keepers, learn more about Judaism in the Hebrew language. In 1924, he established Beth B'nai Abraham in Harlem, a congregation which mixed Reform, Orthodox, and traditional Judaism. During the same year, he and his wife Olive divorced. In 1928, Ford borrowed a strategy from the UNIA and created a business counterpart to his congregation called the B'nai Abraham Progressive Corporation. Like the many business initiatives started by Marcus Garvey, the B'nai Abraham Corporation sold shares of stock to supporters and used the proceeds to purchase buildings for a school and apartment complex. When the stock market crashed in 1929, the corporation went bankrupt. Ford and his followers were devastated but vowed to rebuild elsewhere. Ethiopia had tried for years to persuade Black people with skills and education to immigrate to their country. Ethiopian King Haile Selassie's coronation was scheduled for 1930. And sparked excitement amongst Black people worldwide. Ford and his followers packed up and headed to Africa. Ford's group arrived in Ethiopia in time to perform for the coronation. They further supported themselves by performing at local establishments and soliciting donations from supporters in the United States. Rabbi Matthew remained in New York and continued to nurture the Black Israelite movement which Ford had begun. Other followers decided to join Ford abroad. One woman named Mignon Innes became Ford's secretary and later his wife. They had 2 children. The Fords established a school in Ethiopia which taught English and music. They also purchased 800 acres of land with hopes that more Black Americans would join them and work to create a self-sufficient community. Given that he had no intention of returning to the United States, Ford arranged for an official Ethiopian certification of ordination to be issued for Rabbi Matthew. This document designated Rabbi Matthew as the official representative of Black Israelites in the United States. The U.S. State Department monitored Ford and his group closely and quietly began to limit Black immigration to Ethiopia. These efforts were probably unnecessary, however, since many of Ford's followers were leaving Ethiopia voluntarily by 1935. The agricultural work needed to support the community was difficult, and tensions between Ethiopia and Italy were flaring again. In September of 1935, Rabbi Arnold Josiah Ford passed away. A few weeks later, in October of 1935, Italy successfully invaded Ethiopia. The potential of Arnold Ford's community in Ethiopia can never be known. The Great Depression left few who could financially support the project from the United States. At various times in history, smaller groups left in search of a land they could call their own, but the majority of Black Americans felt that they were fundamentally American, even if they weren't treated as such. They were largely against immigrating and starting over in a new nation. Ford's influence in the United States would take on various forms. Father Divine's Peace Mission Movement, the Nation of Islam, and Rabbi Wentworth Matthew's Commandment Keepers would fill the void and advocate for a new identity and higher status within the nation that Black Americans had already helped to build.